I am Meg Duhr, and I'm going to be presenting this with my new colleague at MAISRC, Dr. Alex Bajcz, who you just heard from a minute ago too. We are going to be talking about some new online data visualization tools coming out from MAISRC. A lot of this is going to be a preview of some really cool stuff in the pipeline. Some of it's going to be available, but we just want to plant the seed and get you guys tuned in and interested in some upcoming tools. I am the research outreach specialist. Alex is our quantitative ecologist, and we have been working together on these, and our positions really complement each other because my job is to try to make our research accessible and implementable to some of our key stakeholders like managers and agency staff and lakeshore residents. But we have a lot of projects, and including the ones we're going to highlight today, that are really complex, and they involve multiple huge data sets. And really the only way to wrap your brain around that and visualize it is with some pretty high-tech tools, which Alex has the abilities to put together. And so we have created some of these platforms to help increase the impact of our science. So why would we spend time and invest in online tools? So primarily, it's about making our data and research accessible to a broader audience. A lot of them have vast amounts of data that need to be centralized and standardized. And we do this so it can be used to support decision-making and management, and also provide this platform and framework where new folks can engage and our audiences can contribute to this ongoing knowledge creation. And we do this because, we're here to solve actual AIS problems, and we wouldn't be wasting our time with this if we didn't want it to be applied. And translating research is always something that academics and research centers struggle with. But a key part of that is that direct outreach. And these online tools will help folks interact with that and make the most of the science. And most of the projects that you're going to hear about are sort of considered done, at least administratively. The grant funding is finished. But what you're seeing in these online tools is our continued investment at MAISRC in ensuring that the projects live on, that people can continue to benefit from the research outcomes, and that these tools stay up to date and reflect kind of the emerging insights and picture of AIS in Minnesota. So increasing our predictive power with the models and adding to our overall knowledge. I just want to set the stage a little bit for where we get all this data and how to think about it. These are just some things to get us thinking about what we consider like traditional data sources, the information that we would go out and gather ourselves, either as MAISRC research teams or agency, local government biologists. And these are, of course, key elements of the projects you're going to hear about. And then we also have these sort of non-traditional, in a sense, and more expansive data sources. Stuff like the citizen science programs that we know and love, STAR, track, AIS detectors. We're also doing a lot more work with surveys. We're integrating the voter inspection surveys that happen on hundreds of public accesses every summer. There's mailed and online questionnaires to gauge people's response and kind of the behavior around aquatic invasive species. And then we have a lot more work in these emerging sources with like open source and crowdsourced data, things like iNaturalist, EDD maps, even Zillow database on home sales. So I want to really quickly introduce and just acknowledge the projects that were behind these web tools, because I want people to understand that these online tools didn't just kind of emerge out of thin air. It's really based on multiple years of research, sometimes multiple graduate degrees happened over the course of the research. And I want to acknowledge the lead scientists and just discuss the primary data sources to contextualize all these different projects. And if you've been coming to the showcases, you have probably heard at least one or two presentations about all of these. So we have the MAISRC invasive milfoil web app, which is really based on work from Ray Newman and Ryan Thum at Montana State University, looking at Eurasian hybrid milfoil genotype distribution And that is also leading to a centralized database for genetic distribution and how they respond to management across Minnesota. The key data sources were the team's years of field research and inventory, also the Minnesota Infested Waters database, and many submitted samples from folks like yourselves, managers, lake associations, and surveyors who submitted samples of hybrid or suspect hybrid milfoil to build this map. Next, we have the AIS Explorer, which is really based on at least 3 different long-term projects led by Amy Kinsley, Nick Phelps, Bob Haight, and Alex Bajcz, as well as our collaborators with EPI Interactive, the team that put together the online dashboard. The 3 main sources here was the DNR Infested Waters database, the boat inspection surveys, and geospatial data layers that tell us about the water connectivity, because we know AIS spread through connected waters. So this is a huge and ongoing project there with multiple people. And next is this plant survey database. This was really work done by Mike Verhoeven and Dan Larkin. Alex just mentioned this in his previous talk, where Mike collected hundreds of surveys from all these different units out there conducting the standardized surveys and brought them together in a large database that we can actually start to understand and ask some questions about how are species spreading, which management approaches are working and not, and start to get some decision power from all that information. The last project to highlight is a new interactive data visualization tool about the Eurasian water milfoil climate change and property values research led by Gretchen Hansen, Sham Thomas, Stephen Pulaski, Dan Larkin, Adriana Castillo, Eric Lonsdorf, and Jake Walsh. The 4 main data sources here was, again, the Infested Waters database, a Zillow database reflecting decades of home sales data in Minnesota that was integrated and looked at with the spread in Minnesota and in lakes of Eurasian water milfoil. They also looked at climate. Climate modeling data with the large-scale temperature databases, water chemistry, and then integrated that into multiple different climate modeling scenarios. So this is a multi-scale, large-scale project as well that we finally have a tool to help visualize that. So just have a couple, we're going to start talking about, I have a couple slides to share about the invasive milfoil app. This is up right now and I'll share a link soon. So there's a lot of reasons why this tool is needed. One, hybrid milfoil is a high-risk, high-impact species. It's difficult to control. We know it's more aggressive than Eurasian milfoil. And right now it's currently lumped in with Eurasian water milfoil on the infested waters list. So we needed a tool to help get everybody on the same page about where hybrid milfoil is. And it's spread easily through the border pathway, and it can also emerge anywhere that northern and Eurasian occur. So that's why this map includes data on where Eurasian, northern, hybrid occur. We have this little key here. And then as far as some of the interactive tools, you can zoom in on a lake and you can see that little pie chart. Of course, we have Minnetonka, which is famous for its hybrid milfoil. We see that it has all 3 species. And then you click on the little icon and it will tell you what genotypes are present. And then if you have a lake that was not included in the survey, but is listed on the map, we have those outlined in blue, and you can click on that. So this is just an example here. Ann Lake was not surveyed as part of the study, but we know that Eurasian water milfoil occurs there. Doesn't mean that hybrid is not present. We just haven't been able to get there to analyze that. So that's the basic, the base map. There are 2 additional features here. You can filter by species. If you just want the map to display where's the hybrid or the northern or the Eurasian water milfoil, you can turn those on or off. And then there's also a search by genotype function. Hybrid water milfoil has exceptionally high genetic diversity. And this project, one of the key contributions was it mapped around the state where the different genotypes are. And why that really matters is because we know that the different unique genetic strains of hybrid milfoil have different responses to herbicides. So this is really important for managers and applicators to know which strains have been found in a lake that they're going to be managing, so we can develop the most effective and targeted herbicide treatments. And this is also leading into ongoing research that I think Ray is talking about at this very moment about their work doing challenge tests on different hybrid milfoil strains. So this is all complementary and will be expanding into a larger database where managers can share their information about treatment outcomes, and we can continue to build our map of where hybrid occurs and what genotypes we have. So real quick about the AIS Explorer tab. If you've been coming to the showcase at all lately, this is going to be an old hat for you. I'm just going to do a quick review on the existing tabs before I turn it over to Alex, who's going to talk about the new features. So this is the AIS Explorer. It's open to anybody. It's free. Here's our surveillance tab. This tool is designed to help people understand and visualize the risk of invasion by two different species, either zebra mussel or starry stonewort at the county level. And these are some of the layers you can turn on or off. The risk score tells us the probability that a lake will be infested within the next 7 years by either of the two species. And the data sources, the main ones that went into this is a boater movement network that was built on about 1.3 million surveys at boat inspections, where the key questions are, where were you last and where are you going? And this is modeled with the invasion history of zebra mussels and starry stonewort, and then geographic information about water connectivity, because AIS can spread downstream. Then every time the DNR publishes a new list of infested waters, the models rerun, they get stronger in their predictive power, and they recalculate the invasion risk statewide. And then you can click on almost any lake in your county. It doesn't include every single lake, but the majority of lakes in Minnesota are included, and understand that risk score. And that factors in water connectivity and boater movement. And then you can also look at the network. So what we're seeing here is the incoming boater network to Ingwadana Lake in Cass County. And you can see that all those lakes that have the yellow exclamation point are infested waters. So Ingwadana has a fairly high amount of boaters coming from zebra mussel infested lakes, and that puts it at high risk. It's a really high level overview. I encourage you to check out the Explorer yourself. The other current tab is the inspection prioritization tab. This is meant to help local managers allocate their limited resources for boat inspection programs to maximize their impact. It uses the same boater movement networks and infested waters database. So at this time, we're only interested in risky boaters, boats that move from infested to uninfested lakes. And highlighting here, it updates every time the DNR publishes a new infested waters list. So this is constantly reflecting the most current data and getting stronger. Managers can choose up to 4 species. They set their inspection threshold, and then it generates a list of lakes that recommended to inspect to meet those targets. So this is about putting the inspector where they will have the highest impact. It is shown on a map, or you can see this chart that really helps us understand where you hit that point of diminishing returns and where the optimal level of inspection investment is to have the highest impact. With that, I am going to turn it over to Alex.
Okay, great. Here, let me get my screen shared so that you guys can see my slides here. Is that good, Meg?
Yes.
Okay, so hi everyone. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Alex Bajcz. As Meg introduced me, I'm MAISRC's new quantitative ecologist, which is like a data scientist, but with an ecology focus. I just started here in June, so this might be the first time some of you are seeing me. And as Meg noted, my role is to sort of help facilitate everything that MAISRC does with respect to data, not just how we analyze them or collect them, but how we receive them and share them too. And as Meg noted, I'm sort of co-leading with Meg our efforts to build some online tools to accomplish those data related goals. And then sort of my half of this talk, I'm not only going to tell you about 3 more tools that we're developing, but I'm going to show you screenshots of some advanced prototypes of each so that we can highlight their key features. And the latter two I'm going to show you, I actually have those prototypes running live on my computer. So during the Q&A, if we want to look at them in the flesh, we can do that. The first thing I'm going to announce, though, and I'm very excited about this, is I'm going to announce that there's a new tab coming soon to AIS Explorer, and that is the Intervention tab. This tab is going to allow a user to explore the impacts of different intervention strategies via a simulation approach. So to simplify here what this does, you might be able to put up to 3 different interventions at 1 or more lakes, enter assumptions about the intensity levels, effectivenesses, and costs of those interventions, and then the model will simulate how much it thinks that approach might reduce risk of new infestations by, compared with doing nothing, plus give you an estimate of the cost effectiveness of that approach. And so rather than just tell you about this in abstract, I want to show you what it will hopefully look like using preliminary mockups that have been provided to us by our partners at Epi Interactive. So this is AIS Explorer as you've come to know it. This up here at the top is where this new tab is going to be going and will soon be available. And down here, you can see that this tab is going to work by walking you through setting up a simulation by asking you a series of questions over 6 tabs. To start with, we're going to allow you to simulate risk of invasion using 2 species, starry stonewort and zebra mussels, but we have an intention to add more of those species over time. And then the last couple things you do on this first tab is pick counties that you want to place interventions within, and then specifically which lakes in those counties you want to be tracking and placing interventions at, and then you'll be able to move to the next tab. On this second tab, you're going to be able to explore the impacts of 3 different interventions: inspections, boat washing stations, and education and outreach. And for each of these on the second tab, you'll be asked to set an intensity level, or effort as we call it, for each lake. How much of this intervention are you doing? And then you can customize those levels by lake down here if you want to. On the third tab, you'll then be asked how effective you believe those interventions will be. Maybe you expect that your inspectors will catch most of the risky boats that are coming in that are carrying invasives. So you might want to say then that you're expecting high effectiveness, although you can again customize that by lake. On this fourth tab, which is scary because I've blown it up to its maximum extent, but don't worry about that. The app will turn everything you've said so far into percentages, which it will use internally to do some math. Here is where you can tinker with every single one of those percentages to your heart's content if you want to, or not. You don't have to do that. There will always be defaults that you can skip that customization here if you would prefer. Then lastly, on this 5th tab, the app's going to ask you, how much does each of these interventions at each of these lakes you're doing going to cost, roughly speaking? And this is to be able to generate a cost effectiveness estimate for you later. The app will then generate a little summary table here on the 6th tab that shows you all the information that you've entered. Here we've had Epi Interactive set up a trial run where we've intervened in all 3 ways to the tune of 50% at the top 10 most at-risk lakes in Cass County. If we then hit run here, we'd get a pop-up telling us how long the simulation is going to take and then asking for an email address, because you don't have to wait around. It's only going to take like 20 minutes or less for these simulations to run, but you don't have to wait around for it. You'll get an interactive report sent to you in your email as soon as the simulation is done. That said, while you're waiting for your results, if you want to set up an alternative run, you can do that right away, even as the previous run is running, and your previous information will be saved if you want to just make some quick modifications, and that will be with the push of a button. I want to actually show you what one of these reports might look like, because I think they are just super cool. So I'm going to hopefully see if this will work correctly. Okay, you all can see this, I hope. This is a mock-up of what one of these reports will look like. At the top, you will see a summary of what it is that you've set up, how much you're saying that you think it costs. And then one of the things you will get back is actually interactive graphics that you can hover over to see how much you are, in theory at least, reducing risk by at each of the lakes you've intervened at. So you can see here, Norway, it did have a 19% chance of becoming infested. That's down to 1%, which is a roughly 90% drop. And you can hover over all of these lakes to see that information. You'll also get tabular data. You'll get interactive graph data so that you can see these results visually. You'll get summaries of what it is that you've done. There will be cost effectiveness estimates in here as well, and so on. So we're really excited about this, and we're looking forward to being able to present it to you here real soon. So this new tab will allow for hopefully endless exploration of alternative intervention strategies in a short amount of waiting time. It'll also feature the option to create a username and login where more features will be available if you want them, such as side-by-side comparisons of results and savings of parameters to save you time if you're setting up complex runs. This tab, I think, really aligns well with not just our goals for AIS Explorer, but with our online tools as a whole, which is to facilitate management and response efforts and guide it as much as we possibly can. I will say that deployment and development of this tab is far along, and we are anticipating that it will debut early next year or earlier. So stay tuned for accompanying trainings and workshops, which will be coming soon. In the meantime, we are interested in finding some interested early adopters who can give us feedback on the app's features, design, and so forth. So if you are interested in potentially serving in that role, I've put my email address up here. Please do not hesitate to send me a message, introduce yourself, and let me know that. All right, I'll move now on to the second app that we have in development, which is quite a bit different. And that's kind of the idea. I want to show here just the breadth of different kinds of apps that we are currently developing. This one is more like a data harvesting app that is specifically designed to catch point intercept aquatic plant survey data. And I apologize for people who have already heard me say this before, but for some context, a PI survey is a systematic documenting using rakes thrown into a lake to tell us what plants are living where and how abundant they are at each spot. So you can see here that everywhere where there's sort of a green dot, that's where a sample was taken. And you can see that the rake comes back with a bunch of plants on it, and which plants specifically came back on the rake and how abundant they were are documented at each of these points. Every year, hundreds of these PI surveys are done on lakes throughout the state by state agencies, private companies, and other interested parties. That's hundreds of thousands of potential data points on the state of our lakes and millions of dollars spent. And there's been this recognition for a long time that this is a potential treasure trove of data for research and management if they could be combined. Unfortunately, that's been a sort of tall order because the methods for collecting these data are fully standardized, but reasonably so. Everyone stores their data a little bit differently. So combining data sets from different actors has not been a straightforward process. So enter Mike Verhoeven, who is a person I'm sure many of you know. He's a MAISRC graduate student who I'm sure you've heard from in previous showcases if you've been coming. You probably know then, if that is the case, that he's been spending hundreds of hours since I think 2016 compiling these data from across the state. And you can see from the numbers here that he's been wildly successful. And I will tell you that these data have enabled several novel and powerful MAISRC projects, sort of all on their own in some ways. So they've been incredibly useful. However, there has been this recognition, especially as Mike goes to graduate, that putting a human in front of this data collection effort at all times just isn't sustainable. So enter me and my new PI data collection app, which is just one in a planned 3-app suite. Here's what we're currently envisioning. We have an app, this one, that catches the data from our partners and prepares them. There's a second app then that houses the data dynamically and makes pulling from it and adding to it easier. And then there's a third app that does the really fun stuff. It summarizes, analyzes, visualizes, and shares the data to anyone who's interested via the web. However, that all starts with catching the data in as quick and as painless a way as possible. So I've been designing an app that is largely like a glorified Google form. It's going to walk the submitter through a couple of quick questions so that it knows what it needs to do. And then it's going to do all that homogenizing that a human like Mike used to have to do by hand. And I will say that in its current prototype form, it takes less than 2 minutes to submit each sheet of data. And I think getting that under a minute is attainable in the long run. So just to give you a quick sense of what the app can do so far, I'm going to show you some screenshots from the prototype. I want to highlight that the 4 things I'm about to show you are all things that the app can do in seconds with the push of a button that would normally take a human quite a while to manage. So that's sort of the goal here. The first thing it can do is what's called data validation. It can make sure that what a person is submitting is what they should be submitting, or that it's accurate. So one of the things it can do, for example, is recognize which lake is being put in so that we can confirm it's the lake the person is intending to put in. A second thing it can do is flip around a submitter's table or move data around with the push of a single button. Otherwise, that can be awfully tedious. Maybe most importantly, it can rename columns so that they are consistent with the ones that are going to be in our giant database, and also get rid of columns we don't strictly need, which is a process that can be very error prone to do by hand. And not to put too fine a point on it, but it can also go in and, with instruction from the user, maybe eliminate rows that don't actually have data that we need. And this is just a mock-up here. So I'm not trying to imply anything about depth data here with this picture, just showing you that the app can do it. The goal here, as I said earlier, is to make this as fast as possible for the submitter, and also to provide some support and guidance for how these data could be stored in the future in ways that make aggregating them easier. In other words, if you wanted to combine your own data, this shows you how you may be able to do that and facilitate the work we're doing at the same time. So I think this app highlights our commitment as a research center to becoming a hub for large and vital data sets that may not yet have a force that's operating to collect and leverage them in mass, with these PI data being a sort of prime example. That said, even with an app almost ready to launch, we cannot do this without help. In particular, we are looking for beta testers to try out the app, make sure it's easy to use. We're also going to be very soon reaching out to some past partners to try out the app, try submitting their most recent PI data so that we are ready when we go live to start collecting this data in mass again. What we can expect here is that this app will be debuting later this fall. I think I can say that safely at this point, with trainings and rollout coming. I will also personally say that I'm expecting to unveil at least one more app in this suite, if not both of them, by next year's showcase. So stay tuned for that. All right. Very briefly, I want to close by highlighting one more app that we're debuting very soon that we're very proud of, that Meg has already alluded to here, and that again is quite different than the ones we've discussed over up to this point. I like to think of this one as kind of like a digital interactive research exhibit, and it's focused on that work by Dr. Gretchen Hansen et al. That Meg already sort of discussed earlier. And I'm not going to speak on behalf of the team here and potentially spoil what their research found. You'll just have to check out the app when it's live, which will be soon, and a formal rollout is coming. I encourage you to do that because I think you'll find the results both very surprising and maybe a bit concerning. However, I do want to preview for you what you can expect to see in this app via a couple of screenshots here. So first, the story of the research is going to be playing out over the course of several tabs, or as I think of sort of them like rooms or exhibits, which you'll be able to walk between via tab buttons at the top of the screen or next and back buttons at the bottom. So you will be able to control the pace at which you explore this research and the story. Second, throughout the app will be these placards of text that explain the main findings, but that also contain little info buttons that, when you hover over them, will provide more clarification on key concepts or ideas. And lastly, a highlight and feature of the app that we're really proud of is that nearly every single one of these tabs will feature an interactive map or graphic that will show you the results dynamically so that you can explore what they mean for you. Each of them is going to have hover and zoom features so that you can dig as deep into the actual data as you want, including down to the level of an individual lake if that is of interest to you. So I think this app showcases our commitment to sharing our research in new, inspiring, exciting, and thought-provoking ways. And this will hopefully be the first of many such apps like this that bring our research right into your living rooms and put our data at your fingertips. That said, as with the previous 2 apps, stay tuned for a rollout and a webinar on this app, which will be coming later this year. And I am very eager to get feedback on this app, especially as it's sort of a pilot of more apps like this to come. So if you are interested in helping with that effort, I encourage you to contact me. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Meg.
That is all we have. Thank you all for listening. we have a little bit of time for questions, so please feel free to put that into the Q&A. And once again, here's everybody's email. So I hope this has piqued your interest. We wish you could have a little more, links to share to make things live, but right now the AIS Explorer is up. Lots of cool things. And even if you are a seasoned AIS Explorer, we do have a couple new features built in. You can tailor how extensive the voter network you want to be displayed is. We now have tribal land boundaries added. There are a couple new features for the experienced folks. And like we said, stay posted for some of these new updates. Any questions? Maybe as a discussion point, Alex, you referenced some of the studies that have already emerged from the meta-analysis of the point intercept survey. And in case people weren't around for this, Mike Verhoeven had done some work and with those data, and we found that curly leaf pondweed there were some really clear trends with management efficacy that were only visible after seeing that huge data set. So some of this work is already being used to improve our management outcomes there. We know that we need to treat curly leaf pondweed for more than 3 years. We know that snow cover in the winter can help you kind of plan for a more or less severe curly leaf pondweed infestation. We know that water quality has a role there too. So thinking about how we can use that data with other information out there is pretty cool. We've only scratched the surface of the potential there.
Yeah, and a classic example that Mike also brings up where these data have been really transformative is there's always been this sense that where an invasive is, it's got to be knocking down natives, right? That there's going to be some sort of negative relationship between an invasive's presence and native presence. And that has always been actually hard to find in practice. And the reason for that is that plants all tend to like kind of the same places, right? So where you see an invasive, you also see natives because that's a hospitable spot. So you kind of need to remove that factor a little bit to be able to see that negative relationship. And Mike has been able to show that relationship clearly, I believe, in some of his research, thanks to this data set. And I know Dan, who's in the audience, could speak even in greater detail about that work since he's more familiar with it. But that's another good example.
Did you want to add anything to that, Dan?
No, nothing to add. I think that, yeah, that's a good example of kind of trying to, the power of larger data sets to try to account for environmental factors that determine where plants are, so you can unlock that piece about how they're interacting.
Yep. And the more that people continue to contribute to this database, just the more effective we will be, especially as conditions change with climate change. We got two little notes, comment questions from Tom Hubbard. The question, and this would be good for people who maybe aren't super familiar with why PI surveys are done and where they go. So the survey results will go to the Lake Association, but what are some of the other entities that use those data besides researchers?
Yeah. Dan, do you mind taking this one? Because I don't know if I do it justice.
No, not at all. Yeah. So it depends on why the PI survey is being done. So depending on permitting for control, it's likely to go to the Minnesota DNR. It might go to other government entities as well. And then PI survey data is also used to guide management. So, planning herbicide treatments, for example.
Well, we do have all the emails of the folks who registered and were in this workshop. So you will be hearing from us when we do have some of these workshops scheduled. And we really look forward to getting your feedback as these apps and future ones develop. Your comments and suggestions are critical to help us keep these kind of grounded in the real world and make sure they're useful to you guys. Nice shout out from Jake Walsh at the DNR. He just wants to note that the statewide PA survey collection app could really be a game changer with lots of exciting possibilities. So thank you for that. we agree, and we're excited about that.
Yep, I think these data are going to be transformative when we have them all in one place. I think I tried to combine transformative and pivotal there, created a new term.
Yeah. And while we have the acknowledgements page in just a few minutes, I just wanted to make sure I fully acknowledge our partners at USpatial. That's the Geospatial Services Division of the university. They have been really great partners in this work. It's extremely cost-effective solution to develop some of these apps. So they've been great to work with. And then our friends at Epi Interactive, which is an outfit from New Zealand, actually, that developed the online AIS Explorer. And so if anybody in the world of invasion biology knows that the Kiwis are serious about the invasive species, so it makes sense that that we have such good stuff coming from New Zealand. So that's Epi Interactive. Bye, everybody. Thank you.